Good afternoon, everybody. It's Rabbi Kolakowski, the Kovalenzer Rebbe here, uh, driving. I took the day off work for Shalom Bayis, and it was worth it. I'm very happy I did that because my wife needs some help with something, and I'm thankful and grateful to Almighty that I'm able to take a day off work. This is really a blessing, and not only the blessing that I have work and I enjoy my work, but to have the work-life balance that's so important in life. Very, very easy to become a workaholic, and especially, I grew up being told how lazy and useless I am. So that really motivates me to want to work hard and now and not feel lazy and useless. And I appreciate the love that my father gave me by saying that. I really generally do, because that really helped me grow. But with that being said, there's two sides to every coin. And it's, not being lazy, because I got up and, probably in a certain sense worked harder than I would have, and took a burden off of my wife. And it's a blessing to be able to do that. And I appreciate that, and I thank God for that. With all that being said, I am also thankful to God that I have a podcast. I sometimes post the link here on the YouTube community tab here. And the podcast is with the Yeshiva of Newark. And so we recorded an episode last night, and we were discussing gun control. And we're also, obviously, that leads to other discussions of politics. And so with that discussion, I mentioned, incidentally, that the history of gun control is a racist history. And it's linked to the racist history of the Democratic Party. And the other rabbi somewhat disagreed with me. He said, today's Democrats are not the old Dixiecrats. I said, well, if that's the case, why do we have Joe Biden, whose mentor, as was Hillary Clinton's mentor, was Senator Byrd, who was a leader in the Ku Klux Klan. It's really, and they all revere him very much, in addition to all the many, many racist statements that Joe Biden has made both in the past and not only in the distant past, but in the recent past. And not only that, but all of the truly, authentically anti-racist statements, not the way that the woke left uses this term of anti-racism, but actually anti-racist, or non-racist, I guess you want to say, but really anti-racist, of Donald Trump, both before his presidency and during his presidency. I mean, I would recommend, even though it's not the most appropriate, there's so for that reason, maybe I'm not recommending, but I'll admit, as I'm mentioning my sins today, that I've been watching this comedian Kayvon, who comes from a Muslim home, Persian Muslim home. He says he's half Persian. His father, I believe, he doesn't really mention his mother's ethnicity or background, but he's very much pro-Trump and very much anti-Biden. And before the election, he made these videos comparing the two, at the time, candidates on their racism, on their support or insult of the military, on their approach to the LGBT community. And the truth, and this is the truth, that by and large, with all the things that liberals rightfully value of being against racism and so forth, President Trump embraces those values, and Biden is against those values, and the Democratic Party is against those values. And I came to a certain epiphany. I didn't want to argue. It was the rabbi who co-hosts the show together, he's my parents' age. I have to be respectful to him. So I didn't want to argue too much, and we came to find it was actually, I think, one of our best podcasts that we did the other night, last night. Probably should be out already on the Yeshiva website. And we came to certain common ground and understanding about discussions about gun control. We really didn't pursue this issue of the inherent racism. And one thing that the Gershman Medrash was there, he said that nobody really is afraid that America is going to turn into some kind of a dictatorship, a fascist or Nazi dictatorship, and that's not really a valid reason to be supporting gun rights and so forth. And I strongly disagree. I'm very scared, to be honest. I am really, really scared that, if Joe Biden got away with what he did, and the Democrats got away with what they did with the election, what's to stop them from putting us in camps, which they've been threatening to do, re-educating, taking our kids away. It's very scary, and I'm scared, and the truth of the matter is, historically, the Nazis learned their ideology from the Democrats. Before World War II, Mussolini, the fascist, said, he looked at FDR and he's like, he's one of ours. And so fascism is a left wing, at least from the American perspective of individual freedom and rights and liberties and values, and the way that the left looks at these things. These terms left and right mean something different in Europe than they mean in America. The European left and right are really just two branches of the American left, and neither of them are liberal. The truth of the matter is that the classical liberals are those that Americans would consider to be the right, and in general, libertarians are viewed in America today as being on the right. Whereas the left is more about control, big government, really all the same things. And again, the point, whether it's historically 100% accurate or not, that one of the first things that the Nazis did was take away the guns. And so I stick by what I say. In any event, the point that I'm making here is about something totally different. It took me 8 minutes to get to the point that I really wanted to talk about, and it was an epiphany that I had, I guess, this morning thinking about these issues, was that we know, and I was listening to the radio. I like to listen to dissenting views, and I was listening to NPR today, and they were interviewing someone about Black History Month and so forth. And the truth of the matter, the fact of the matter, when we talk about the 1619 Project versus the 1776 Project, and the fact that Joe Biden got rid of President Trump's 1776 Project and salaciously and offensively and maliciously and perniciously, and I'm trying to think of that word, so I'm doing the Joe Biden thing where you just say stuff until your brain gets to the point of where you're going. And I'm not, I've often said I'm an old soul, so libelously claimed that somehow the 1776 Project is not only erroneous, which they claim, which is of course not true, but that it's misleading and racist. When you read the report of the 1776 Project, you have, first of all, there were African Americans on the board, and you have right on the first page, you have Martin Luther King, you have Frederick Douglass, and so forth and so forth. So it's really libelous to label this as being racist. Doesn't even make sense. But again, it comes to the left's definition of racism and anti-racism. And like we said before, what the left calls anti-racist is racism, because they are racists. The left in America today has essentially rejected Martin Luther King and embraced the pre-Hodge Malcolm X. They are the same segregationists that the Democrats have always been. They changed their tune a little bit, but their essential ideology of the Democratic Party remains the same to this day. It is a segregationist party. It is a party that does not believe that we can have racial harmony and unity in this country. And so for that reason, it's not so much, although it certainly is, and it's hurtful how it is, an insult to America, of how the left seeks to define America by 1619 instead of 1776. But it demonstrates who those people are who define it in that manner. That they see it as being essentially that is what they see America as, and therefore they see it as the definition. It shows what they really believe about themselves. Their entire approach is about racism and slavery. And it's not talking about the people that they're trying to condemn, it's talking about themselves. It's what Freud would call projection. That they're projecting their own evil, racist, disgusting, segregationist ideology, trying to frame this country as being founded on that because that is what they believe in. And again, with that being said, I can hear two sides to every coin. When Malcolm X says that he doesn't want the black community to be defined on white terms, I can hear that as yes and no, but the difference is America is not a white country. Meaning it's almost impossible, or at least very difficult, for someone who doesn't have that shared heritage to be French or German or Italian, even if they can be citizens of those countries. But America is different. And the same thing with China or India. As diverse as India is, there's still something that's Indian. And China has its diversities, but it's of course being an extreme left-wing country trying to squelch those diversities. And don't you fool yourself to think that the left in America don't want to do to us what their fellow leftists in China are doing to the Muslim Uyghurs. Because that's exactly what they want to do. And they look at us the same way that the Chinese look at the Uyghurs. It's 100% true. And that's why they ignore the plight of the Uyghurs when they talk so much about Islamophobia, this and that, unless it's their type of Islamophobia. point that I'm bringing out here is as follows: that that's not who we are. They project their own ideas on us, and we can bring so much evidence of this, of how left-wing woke culture is encouraging segregation. And so the answer that I would have to Malcolm X is that America is not a white ideology. It is a universal ideology. And there is something universal that all people of all races and all religions share, and no religion at all, which I think is also a religious point of view and in a sense a religion. But the point that I'm saying here is that there is something we share, and that idea is the American idea. I'm not saying that it only belongs to Americans, it belongs to all the world, but it's America that really bore this out, and that happened in 1776, meaning the 1619 America was not a 1619 America. It was just how the world was in its fallen state, in its sinful fallen state. And 1776, we tried to lift ourselves up out of that and make something new, make something different, make something unique. And I mentioned last night in the podcast about how McKinley lost his mountain, and I found that to be incredibly offensive. I personally found that to be one of the most offensive things that Barack Obama ever did. Not because I seek to insult the indigenous peoples, but because the indigenous American is no different than the indigenous European or the indigenous Aborigine in Australia, and obviously their cultures are different. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that America is our Constitution. It's not even 1776. It's really 1787. It's really when this country developed into what we have now, this current system that is so incredible, the longest living system of government, at least in modern history, continual, to the point where the scholars will tell us that America is not only the newest country, but it's also the oldest country. And it's true. There's something unique about this country that separates us from everything else in the world. And that is not a white issue or a black issue or an Asian issue or an indigenous issue. It is a human issue. And the fact of the matter is, and that is what I must reject from all the segregationists, because the segregationists will tell us that we are different, even to the point where some racial theorists will try to tell us that the different races are indeed different species, but we're not. We are one human race. Yes, that is not to say we want to get rid of any particular parochial cultures and ideas. We can celebrate those to a point, but there is a limit. If it limits other people's freedoms, people who are not part of that association, if it limits other people's human rights, then that's not acceptable, of course. And that's why, like we've told the story many times here about the colonial British government worker who said that he he will respect the Hindu practice of burning widows if they will respect the Christian practice of hanging men who burn innocent widows, right? Meaning, we're not going to stop you from worshiping your gods, but we will stop you from committing murder if we can. And if we can't, there will be consequences for you committing murder. And that's the point that we're bringing out here, is that, and the fact of the matter is, no, there is no issue that we have. I recognize fully that the group, the Nation of Islam, is not a violent militant group that's seeking to kill people and so forth. And so they have their rights to have their beliefs and to state their beliefs, and for that to be part of the American experiment, that we are sharing different ideas, and just like we have the right to reject their ideas, they have the right to reject our ideas, and that's okay. And that only happens in America, and that's why I'm saying it's not a white or black issue, but a uniquely American issue that is universal, and is supposed to be universal. And so we have no issue with the color of your skin, or the manner of your dress, or the mode of your worship, because America is about a common denominator that I think is not really a lowest common denominator, but a highest common denominator. Oh, I forgot to take the shoes. And that's something that's very important. So we can have room for different views, as long as it's within this milieu of liberty and freedom. And so you might have a different view than I have about abortion, about same-sex marriage, about any number of issues, about theology, and that's okay, because this is a free country, and I cannot force you to change, and you cannot force me to change. But the problem with today's left is they don't believe that. I don't mean liberals, I mean those on the left. And I think there are a lot of people who vote Democrat who truly are liberal, and they're just either brainwashed or willfully ignorant, or just I don't know. Because if you really study, I mean, I hear people talk about what a demagogue Donald Trump. Like I was listening this morning about a self-proclaimed scholar talking about how Donald Trump incited the events that took place on January 6th, which he didn't. And again, are we going to hold Bernie Sanders responsible for the man who shot and almost killed Steve Scalise? Because he was a Bernie supporter. How's this any different? When all Donald Trump did was he said, to go peacefully and patriotically that's one part of it, and the other part of it is, so they said, well, on the BBC radio, they were saying, well, he's shouldn't he be held responsible for all the things he said? Well, what did he say? Well, he didn't concede the election, et cetera, and we can't hear on YouTube, we can't repeat what those claims were, and I'm not. But the fact of the matter is, okay, you want to talk about YouTube being a private company and they can do what they want, but if that's the case, so why can't a private company, kind of like, people thought that Barry Goldwater was a racist because he was against the federal civil rights bills when he was a libertarian. He was saying that's not the job of the federal government. He even if we despise, that should be a state's issue, and if we can despise racism without violating people's rights. But here they've set that precedent. How is this different? How is this discrimination different than other discrimination, especially now where how the world looks at discrimination has transformed, that now there are federal protections being proposed, and I know at least on the executive level, the Trump administration held this, to protect religion as a protected class. And how is and the argument against that was always, well, you could change your religion. And that was a reason why religion would not be a protected class the way that race would be a protected class. But now, if religion is a protected class, as a lot of a lot of these issues have been claimed, so then if religion is a protected class, then so should politics. Political views should be a protected class. And we should be able to be protected for, we should not be, there should be a prohibition against political discrimination. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of people say belief is not a choice. This is what, and I kind of feel that, this is what I really believe, It's not a choice, really. Meaning, you can change behavior, perhaps, is a choice, and changes in belief, you can change your beliefs, but is it really a choice, or is it really a conclusion that you get to? And so the same way that we're not allowed to discriminate against sexual identities, right, in modern America. And people say it's not a choice, right? And, the argument often is, well, the behavior perhaps is a choice, even if the feeling is not a choice. But still, that's how it is, right? And I think, it's fair to accept that, but we have to therefore accept the next part of the calculation, that we accept that, therefore, if we, the way that we recognize sexual identities as, even if they're not immutable, but as not being a choice, and therefore being protected uh, from uh, from discrimination, and we have extended that today in America to include religious identities as as being protected identities. Certainly. So then it should follow that political identities should be protected, and therefore the discrimination that many of the big tech companies are doing against certain political views is discriminatory just as much as any other type of discrimination that they despise, and rightfully so. I'm saying that they're right to despise these approaches and these views and these beliefs. I'm saying to despise discrimination against these views of discrimination. But again, we get back to this psychological outcome, is that indeed the people who are on the left are they are guilty of discrimination. They are guilty, and they are the racists. They are not liberal. And it's not only that they're not classically liberal, but they are not actually liberal. Well, although classical liberalism is actually liberal, they have nothing liberal about them. Free speech only matters if speech that you despise is protected. And so that's why I value the rights of Louis Farrakhan to be able to get up and speak and say things that maybe might offend certain people. The fact of the matter is, though, I've listened to him, and I don't find him nearly as offensive as a lot of the people on the left. He thinks about what he says, and I disagree with him, but I don't find it necessarily offensive. I find it as being, and I don't believe him to be a racist. And that's the difference also, is that Malcolm X before the Hajj definitely was a racist. And I don't believe, at least by virtue of the language that he uses, that Louis Farrakhan is actually racist. Maybe he used to be. And again, is racism really as despicable? I disagree with racism, and I believe it to be evil. But is it really the original sin that a lot of people want to convince us that it is? And if so, why is it that they themselves, those people who speak about it so much, I think thou dost protest too much, they themselves generally are the ones who are the racists. And it's worthwhile to point it out, who they are and what they are. Does it mean they can't change? No, they could change. But this is their belief. And so while it's not immutable, I don't know if it's a choice. I don't think it is. I think it's who they are, and I think we have to learn how to deal with that. I think we need to learn that there are two sides to this coin, and the world is not perfect. We live in a fallen world. If we live in a world, we are sinners, and we're in Gullus. That's the term that we use. We're in exile. This exile can be an exile of thought, an exile of words. It exists on many different levels. And it's something and we can't be doichik as a case. We have to recognize if we try to push the eschatology for the proper time, we can often lead to more pain and suffering than all of that which we're trying to eliminate. So, and that's an important message in general, because we cannot be pushing eschatology. Eschatology has to come in its proper time, because it's there, it's just not manifested yet. That's the whole idea of eschatology. It exists. So thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and we'll see you all later.